I bought the base model M2 MacBook Air despite it being possibly the worst configuration that you can buy for this laptop, and yet also the most controversial. However, I really like it. Let's talk about that. Long story short, I needed a laptop. When it comes to making these videos, it's a whole lot easier for me to manage the channel, make thumbnails, write scripts, all from the comfort of wherever, rather than being stuck inside of a den all day at my computer. Since I've been on disability from work, it's been extremely overwhelming being at my desk for pretty much the entirety of my day. So I wanted to give myself the ability to take this channel and the work that I do for it wherever I go. Speaking of the channel, quickly, let me just say that most of you aren't subscribed yet. It would mean a lot if you could change that just by clicking the subscribe button and the bell. We're very close to 5K. Thank you so much for the support that you've given me. It's been absolutely incredible. Now, what I ended up doing was buying the 16-inch MacBook Pro again, since I had built a new PC. However, I just felt that it was too much for what I needed. It was not only expensive, but it was not portable. And despite it being a really good, fast laptop, I didn't need that as a secondary device. So I settled for the newly released M2 MacBook Air. But why though? I could have got a Windows laptop or even the M1 MacBook Air for a lot cheaper than this thing. This is not mine, by the way, or else I would probably just use this. And you're probably already jumping to the comments right now to tell me that the M1 MacBook Air is a better value, has a faster SSD, and you're right. You're 100% correct. But first, let me explain my decision. Back when I bought the 16-inch MacBook Pro, Apple had a promo running where you get a $210 Apple gift card with the purchase of the laptop. And because the gift card cannot be refunded, I'd been stuck with it, and since I switched to Android, I've had no use for anything when it comes to Apple accessories. So I've been sitting on it and waiting and waiting and waiting. So fast forward to the M2 MacBook Air launch, and well, I wasn't able to get one. They sold out extremely quickly, and I was just kind of left there sitting in the dust, not really sure what to do with this gift card. However, the other night I was looking at some USB-C cables thinking, just to pick up an extra few of them since they're really high quality and I have this gift card, and boom, they had stock. They had this thing available for pickup that day, and the student discount promo was still running. So not only do I get a discount on the laptop, but I get to use my gift card and get another gift card back. Now, this is probably going to get confusing for a little second, so I'll do my best to explain this as well as I can. Apple always has a student promo running. Not all the time do you get an add-in item like, a gift card or AirPods, but around this time of the year they do for students that are going to college or university. You can just pick up the laptop without having to prove that you're a student by ordering it through Apple's online website. Not that I'm a student or not, you'll never know, but anyone can do it. This thing cost $1,500 for the base model in Canada. And with the student discount, it comes down to $1,375. The M1 with the student discount in Canada comes down to $1,169. Now, because I had a $210 gift card, purchasing this actually was $5 less than if I were to have bought this without the gift card. So I figured for the money that I'm paying, it's probably worth it to just go for this since I'm already saving a huge amount. The M2 MacBook Air gets a slightly larger 13.6-inch display versus the 13.3-inch on the M1 MacBook Air, and despite the inclusion of a notch, you still get more vertical resolution. Speaking of the display, you get 500 nits on the M2 versus the previous 400 nits on the M1, which just makes it a whole lot more usable outdoors. That 100 nits really does make that much of a difference. Now, the one thing that I was really concerned about with the M2 MacBook Air was the lack of promotion for the price. Not that the M1 had it, however, the 16-inch MacBook Pro did, and I was really used to using that display. But what I can say is after having used this for a couple hours, I actually completely forgot that this didn't have ProMotion. The display is smooth, it looks great, and honestly at this size, it's not something that you necessarily need, especially for what you're doing on this laptop. While I do like 120 Hz plus displays and I use a 165 Hz display for my computer, in a smartphone makes perfect sense. For a gaming computer makes perfect sense. For a small consumer MacBook, I can see why Apple didn't put it in. It would have been really nice to have, but honestly, this display is perfectly fine and usable and I have zero issues with it. The M2 MacBook Air is also thinner all around than the M1 MacBook Air, and it has the new boxy design like the current MacBook Pros. The keyboard has a full-size function row as opposed to the slimmer one on the MacBook Air, and it's also noticeably lighter. Overall, the M2 MacBook Air is just a more comfortable experience. On the laptop, you still get the lame I/O setup with the 2 USB 4 ports and a headphone jack. However, because this laptop now has MagSafe, you don't actually have to worry about only having one USB port available when you're charging. Personally, I would have really liked to see the implementation of an SD card slot on this laptop like we have in the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. However, I get it, this isn't a content creator computer. This is for the average consumer. And to be honest, with that, this is kind of where I want to segue a little bit. This is by far the worst spec MacBook Air that you can quite possibly buy, according to literally everybody on the internet. This is the base model. It has only 256 gig SSD and 8 gigs of unified memory. Exactly like the M1 Air from a couple of years ago. And while I can agree, for the price, it's not really that great. This costs you significantly more. However, that's not necessarily the problem that people are having with this computer. This M2 MacBook Air uses a single NAND SSD as opposed to the dual NAND SSD that's found in the M1. What that means is this reads content 15 to 30% slower on average and writes almost 45% slower than the M1. That just straight up sucks. But not really. Okay, because considering that these things already have a really fast SSD, if you're paying attention to who these laptops are for, it's not a big deal. Personally, I haven't noticed any sort of difference in performance when comparing this laptop to this one. This one is significantly faster and handles my workload a lot better than the M1 MacBook Air, and the only time that you'll notice a difference between this and that one is if you're transferring a large amount of files or you're running a benchmark. Now, to completely avoid this issue, you could just buy the 512 gigabyte variant of this laptop if you can find it in stock. It is a dual NAND SSD and is completely fine and faster than this one. But it's not really that big of a deal. And by the time that you already spec out the laptop and pay all this extra money, you're almost in the ballpark of the 14-inch M1 Pro, which is a significantly better laptop for most people. Now, there's no excuse for Apple having done this, and personally, I think it's really dumb and just shows you how much money they're trying to squeeze out of this new laptop. But to be completely honest with you, I think the hate train that this laptop has found itself on is just not deserved at all. From the second that the M2 MacBook Air came out, there were videos comparing it to the M1 Pros and the M1 Max. And despite the M2 being a newer chip, it doesn't compete with the Pro chips that Apple has. The M2 is not faster than the M1 Pro, and if that's what you thought, you were misinformed. The M2 is just a replacement for the M1, and we've yet to see a new M2 Pro, M2 Max, or M2 Ultra chip, but those are likely coming in the future. So this laptop got a pretty bad start being thrown into a performance class or a performance category that it didn't necessarily even belong in the first place. One thing that also doesn't help is that the Air line, at least with these new M series chips, doesn't have a fan. Keeping the M2 cool under any sort of sustained task like editing a 10-bit 4K video or doing any sort of photo editing can be quite hard, and you'll notice it thermal throttling. And while this laptop can do those tasks, it just takes a little bit longer. But this thing was never designed to be a pro device, so why are there so many videos complaining about the thermal issues and the performance against these pro devices? Well, I'll tell you. I think there's a couple reasons, and reason number one, Apple simply could have just designed this laptop to handle thermals much better than it does. YouTubers like MaxTech have found that if you just replace the back panel, you can put thermal pads in it which significantly decrease the temperature of the laptop and can have it running sustained loads for a very long time without throttling or taking an extremely long time to get to that throttling point. So why wouldn't have Apple done that in the first place? But secondly, to tell you the truth, I think that it's just a talking point and it riles people up and it gets views. Sadly, I think that the negative undertones of all of the videos that I've watched about this laptop have plagued a ton of people's purchasing decision for what is honestly a really amazing computer. Personally, I love this thing. I think the display, the size, the portability, everything about it is more than perfect for what I need. You see, the M1 Air seriously punched above its weight class, and a lot of people purchase this as a beginner social media laptop to handle their editing, and this is just that, but much more. It is a better computer objectively than the M1 Air, and while it is a worse value, you can find it for cheaper using the Apple Student Discount, or honestly, just wait for it to go on sale. This thing went on sale all the time. It wasn't that rare that you'd see this thing on sale for a few $100 less on Amazon or Best Buy only months after the release of it. So am I angry with myself for purchasing possibly the worst version of the M2 MacBook Air? No, I think this laptop is perfectly fine and more than enough for most people that need to use it. And honestly, the value, despite it being a little overpriced compared to the old one, I still think is a great computer. I'm very happy with my purchase. I'll have a longer review in the future, and I'll try to make some more videos about this thing if any of you find it interesting. If you have any questions that you want to ask me about it that will end up in a review, let me know in the comments. I really appreciate the support that you guys have been giving me. Thank you so much for watching my content, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.